Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, and welcome back to The Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn, and thanks for joining me on this episode of The Catholic Mama. All right, so usually on this show, we delve a lot into the Catholic faith and apologetics, how to explain, how to defend the Catholic faith, whether that's your own misunderstandings of the faith or hesitations about it, or helping to promote the faith to other people who are either, maybe lukewarm Catholics or not even Catholic at all, not even religious at all. So we spend a lot of time in the logic of it. But that is not just what Catholicism covers. Right? Catholicism is about truth, beauty, and goodness. And we spend a lot of time on the truth, and because I think that's very important. I've mentioned this before in some of the mini Catechism Friday episodes, that you can tell in the different versions of the Catholic Catechism what was at the time of that edition. And it could be that a good chunk of the catechism was spent on the sacraments because, people at that time when it was being edited and reformulated needed to hear more about the sacraments. Well, I spend a lot of time on the truth portion of Catholicism because I feel like a lot of people are either not knowing, they had poor catechesis, so they just don't know what they should know about the Catholic Church and just how easily to defend the Catholic faith is. Maybe they are or maybe people are really focused on the beauty of the church. It's especially on social media. Instagram is filled with very beautiful posts of, perfectly situated candles and flowers and very reverent pictures in churches. And I'm not saying that any of that stuff is bad, but it's so easy in the social media age to come across the beauty and goodness. Goodness is something else in the social media age to come across the beauty and goodness. Goodness is something else that we also need to maybe have more of a focus on. We focus so much, especially on social media, again, on the bad things that are happening, calling out our opponents, both politically and religious opponents, that just do not believe what we believe. And if you look into the comment section on any post that might be even slightly inflammatory, my goodness, goodness is missing there. So these things all have their purpose. I just happen to focus a lot on the truth on this podcast. But again, goodness and beauty are all there as well. The Catholic faith covers everything because it is, as Catholic means, universal. It is a universal church. It's a worldwide church. And the world does not just run on truth alone. We run on goodness and beauty as well. So to that end, I wanted to spend some time on today's episode talking about the reasons why I love my Catholic faith. And maybe you'll say, oh, okay, those are the ones I agree with. Those would probably be my top 5. Or maybe it's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And maybe you'll look deeper into things. So we'll start there. And a lot of this, it kind of blends all 3 aspects, that truth, beauty, and goodness. So where I want to start is a couple months ago, before, if you've been following me for a few months, a few months back, my family and I picked up kind of haphazardly and decided to move to the middle of the country from the East Coast, where I've been almost my entire life, where my kids have been their entire lives. And we decided to move closer to family and maybe a little bit more breathing room in terms of not being so hemmed in by traffic and large populations as we were in the Northeast corridor of the United States. But right before we moved, I got asked by our old parish if I would mind, because they knew that I was a convert, if I was speaking about my own conversion story and why I'm Catholic in front of the parish. They were doing a series, and each week was a different theme, and conversion was the week that I was tapped for. So I wrote a very brief speech, talk that I actually want to start with, because it does help to explain a lot of why I'm Catholic and what has kept me Catholic and why I love being Catholic. So I'm just going to start. I'm just going to read it. It's not long. So we'll start from the very beginning as if you guys were sitting in the pews that day that I read it. Okay, so hello, my name is Christine Mooney-Flynn. I am a parishioner here at St. Pat's. Unfortunately, I love that church, but we are no longer near there. Anyway, so I'm a wife and mother of a 5, 3, and 1-year-old, as well as a little bun cooking away now. I'm also a Catholic blogger and podcast host. Although I've been a wife and mother for a number of years, I've been a parishioner here and a Catholic podcaster / blogger for about the same amount of time as I've been Catholic. I was baptized at this church just about a year ago now at Easter Vigil in 2018. It seems that while I was very far removed from even the thought of being Catholic for many years, once God decided to turn my heart, he made quick work of me. In fact, for most of my life, I was very firmly entrenched in the, quote, spiritual but not religious camp. In a mix between Star Wars and poorly studied Eastern religions, I believed that the universe was governed by two opposing yet equal forces of good and evil, and these kept everything neatly and nicely in balance. But after various personal and global tragedies, from family member suicides to 9/11, friends who died in horrific car accidents to tsunamis, it began to seem that evil was winning, and maybe evil was just the default of the human condition. That didn't seem right in big ways and small, but still, the good seemed much weaker than the bad. And so, if these weren't equal forces, then maybe there weren't any forces at all, good or evil. Maybe the universe was just a haphazard collection of colliding atoms, that the concepts of good and evil weren't real to begin with. Everything that is simply there because of chance, and everything that is only includes the things that we can study and see and taste and touch and hear. So this naturally led me to naturalism and atheism, and then unfortunately to nihilism, where I sat very certain of my beliefs until just over a year ago. But while it was the problem of suffering and evil that got me to reject God, it was glimpses of his love that brought me back to him. And most of these glimpses came from the soul-shaking love I have for my children. Because how could it be that the love that I feel, the time I spend, the care I give them, all of that would be for nothing? That in less than 100 years, we'd all be dead and that would be it. The implications of my atheism did for my children. It didn't matter. But the love. That kept me in a strange limbo between despair over our mortality and hope that there could be something more. I am grateful that there is something more, something much more. And when God moved my stubborn, made-up, closed-up heart, he made me into someone completely new. Once I came to understand God, the despair disappeared in an instant. The grudges I held, the cavalier attitude I had for others' struggles, my intense desire just to be left alone, it disappeared, and instead I was born new. A new person who is caring and loving and open and not so very hard on others. And so now I spend as much of my time as possible talking about, sharing, and evangelizing the Catholic faith. I was always someone who chafed under authority, always hated being told what to do. But a funny thing happened when I became Catholic. I found that just as Jesus promised, the burden is light and the yoke is easy. I have willingly and happily accepted it all, from the real presence of Jesus in the timeless and true social teachings of the Church, though they may not be very popular in today's society, to taking full advantage of the sacrament of confession as often as I can. In shouldering the burden that Christ offers, I am freer now than I ever was, back when I believed I was my own master. Because the truth is, I was never my own master, but without God, without the firm and just and merciful Church and her teachings, I let myself believe lies that pulled me farther and farther from him. That is until he boomeranged me back not so very long ago. And so now I can look forward to saying that I am a Catholic, a convert, and a true believer for many more years, not just this one. So that's what I said in front of the parish about 6 months ago, and it still holds true now. I mean, the only things that have changed is that my children are slightly older, and I'm slightly closer to delivering a baby. And actually, just over, I guess about 4 to 6 weeks from now, I'll have a new baby in my arms, God willing. Beach. It kind of encompasses a lot of what I love about being Catholic and how beautiful I find the Catholic faith. So the first one I'll start with is actually one of the last things I mentioned, and that's the Sacrament of Reconciliation. I would have, before I became Catholic, would have been appalled if I had thought of the idea of going to confession. That just would have been unreal. Having a human tell me that I was forgiven, oh, get out of town. I don't need that. That's just a middleman telling me something that I already know. I'm good. The truth is, though, I wasn't. I wasn't good. It's so hard. And I've heard this in Bible studies and along the way where people say, does God forgive me? I'll have my armchair confession and I'll, be sitting at night and feel really sorry for things that I've done. But did God forgive me? I don't know. I don't know if he did. That's a beautiful thing about the sacrament of reconciliation is that you do know. I don't know. I don't know if he did. That's a beautiful thing about the sacrament of reconciliation is that you do know. Now, God forgives us anytime that we are asking for forgiveness. But as humans, man, it's so nice and so important and so necessary to actually hear the words that, wow, you're forgiven. And I got to tell you, if you haven't been to confession in a while, go. Because as I personally walk in, burdened down with things that aren't even, the more often I go to confession, the less heavy my confessions tend to be because I go frequently enough that it keeps me from messing up too much. Guys, I stop and think, well, do I really want to confess that? But also because it's aligning my actions and my thoughts and my words to God's hope for me more so than my own. So, but you walk into confession burdened down with these things that you need to get off your chest and would love to hear God's forgiveness for, and you walk out with that forgiveness and feel 100 pounds lighter. That should be a weight loss plan, just going to confession. Because you feel so much lighter and freer. And like I said, going to confession more regularly, at least once a month now, it keeps me kind of like when you pray a lot. It's not that God is answering your prayers, but the purpose of prayer is to align your will with God's. And the more often you pray, the more you find yourself in line with God's will. And life is more joyful and I don't want to say easier, but it is easier in a way. You don't feel like you're fighting as much. So the same with confession is that it helps you align your actions, thoughts, and deeds, words with God's desire for you. So I think that's just, and especially because if you followed me for any length of time, maybe you've seen this on an Instagram post of mine that weighed really, really heavily upon me from almost 20 years ago. And one of those was the fact that when I was 17, I opted for an abortion, which over the years, I was just very misguided, very, very much uneducated about what a fetus was. I was in that, I had the idea that it was just a clump of cells. And clearly I know the difference now. I was a very pro-choice feminist at this point, and very angry, and the patriarchy was real. I mean, I was steeped in a lot of untruths. But over the years, despite the fact that I thought, or I really believed that the fetus growing inside me was just a clump of cells, I would apologize to it. Years later, I was still apologizing to that baby. I was like, I'm so sorry for what I've done. But very much still sure that was the only option for me. It took years. It took many, many years, 11 years later, probably, until I had my first kid, to think otherwise, that maybe there were other options. But I felt like that was the only option for me at the time. Clearly it wasn't, but I didn't know that. So anyway, but I would be apologizing to this soul that I wasn't even sure was real, but I was still apologizing to it. Did anybody hear me? Did the baby hear me? Did it forgive me? If there's a God, did God forgive me? I mean, this weighed on me for many, many years. And even after my baptism, at that point, all my sins have been washed away. My husband would joke that I really got off easy because he was Catholic and had to go into confession and confess everything that he never confessed in the past, 2 decades. As a convert and not even a Christian, getting baptized for the first time, all those sins were forgiven. But I still had that one in particular that weighed heavily on me, so heavily on me, And so I confessed it. And I have to say that hearing the priest's absolution and his very, very kind and understanding words that day, I'm very blessed with the priest that I was able to confess this to. He really changed. He made me see God's mercy right there in the confessional. It lifted a burden from me that I didn't realize. It bothered me a lot over the years, but I didn't know how weighed down I was. And after I confessed that in particular, the amount of joy that I seemed to be capable of in everyday living expanded, it grew. And my ability to not just be a saying no person, to being a yes person, and much more open and willing to meet other people and do things for others, reach out a helping hand, confession, and especially confessing that particular sin, opened a whole world to me that I didn't even know I was missing out on. So this sacrament for me especially has been one of the most beautiful things about the faith, and one of the things that I am a huge, huge supporter of and evangelizer of. Please go to confession. And I am very blessed now to have such a strong faith that it feels like I'm getting more in line with God's will for myself every day. I'm making progress on things like I have over the years. I'm a very impatient person and very prone to very quick anger and very slow to forgive. And going to confession has really changed that, because there'd be so many times where I'd get angry at somebody or be really impatient with my mom or dad. Like, why did I do this again? How am I going to stop myself? And the truth is, you can't do it alone. I needed God, and I didn't know that at the time. But going to confession is the thing. That confession, there's no way I would have ever even thought that about myself. So it is on the big things, the big sins that we need to get off our chests and atone for, the little nagging things that we just can't seem to get ourselves out of. Confession can help with all of it. So I am so grateful for this sacrament, eternally grateful for this sacrament, and what it's given me. So that is probably the number one for why I love being Catholic, is having and knowing and feeling God's forgiveness for all the messed up stuff that I do and have done throughout my whole life. Okay, so on a lighter note, speaking of reconciliation, or maybe not even on a lighter note, a different note, the problem of suffering and evil is something that, and I mentioned this in my little speech about my conversion, is something that really is hard for people to accept. That how could there be a loving God when there's so much evil and suffering in the world? Now, this all can be answered very briefly by stating that God gives us free will. And so we are able, even if it hurts other people, to choose to do certain things or say certain things that causes others suffering and pain. But without God, and without this understanding that in the end, he reconciles all of it, that all the tears are wiped away, that past debts are wiped clean, that people can come to a full understanding of why certain things happened in their lives. This happens, in the afterlife. That has changed how I viewed the pain and suffering in the world. From, a cousin of mine, I think it'll probably be I think it's the 16th anniversary of one of my cousins' suicide of one of my cousins. He used to have a really hard time with the pain and suffering in the world and not understand how any of it, what was the point of living, basically. I remember one story that really affected him very deeply was a story of, I guess, an older gentleman who was senile, got into a car and drove the car into a crowded, completely by accident, drove the car into a crowded marketplace and killed a good number of people. And I remember my cousin was really shook up by this. Like, why that? Why is that okay? How, is there a God? Because how can all this be reconciled? And if you're looking at it that we're all here by accident, atoms are just colliding with atoms, there's no purpose in life, you can't make sense of any of this. But now that I can, not that I know, I'm not omniscient, so I don't know exactly the plan and how it does all reconcile, but I know that it does. And again, God will wipe away every tear in exactly the plan and how it does all reconcile, but I know that it does. And again, God will wipe away every tear in the end. That makes all the hard stuff, all the pain and the suffering, less heavy. Not to say that we don't do anything about it. We should absolutely be doing and working towards fixing the world and spreading God's love throughout it. But as far as, violent deaths, or just general pain and suffering, illnesses, it's less traumatic, and just more something that God will fix in the end. As hard as that is to hear for anybody who is currently trying to deal with that trauma and tragedy in their lives currently, it does help in a way. And at least when I've been blessed so far, super traumatic happened personally to me, but it helps me to heal over the things that I was previously hanging on to. Okay, so the third thing that I love about my Catholic faith is my prayer life. I mentioned earlier that I would, have a slip up and be really angry at somebody, or be really impatient, like, oh my God, I can't do that, or just get so overwhelmed by being a mother or work stuff. Like, how am I supposed to do this? I feel so alone. I need help, but who's going to help me? Nobody's going to help me. I'm in this all by myself. Well, no. Understanding and having a robust prayer life has been life-changing as well. To know that when I'm having a very difficult day, even if it's just my patience wearing super thin and little annoying things happening and nothing, hugely tragic or traumatic happen, to know that I'm not alone and I can say, God, please help me. I need you. Help. Just something as simple as that has been transformative, because I'm less likely to feel like a victim of my circumstances and more feeling like there is a plan. And if I align myself with the will of the one who created that plan, it's still going to be hard. I'm still going to lose my patience, but there is a loving, listening ear out there ready to hear me out and help me as much as I can open myself up to that help. So there is that spontaneous prayer that's been great. There's also just praying the rosary. And that's really been something that I have loved to do over the past year and a half since I became Catholic, especially the sorrowful mysteries. As a person who is impatient and prone to quick anger, too, by multiple people as icy over the years, I am not particularly touchy-feely when it comes to emotional stuff and how other people might be feeling. It's just not my strong suit right off the bat. But to pray on the sorrowful mysteries has changed that in a lot of ways. Just to know that God came to earth and suffered for us all, it makes my hesitancy to be very warm and fuzzy with people unacceptable, and really it makes it seem very childish and foolish. So praying on the sorrowful, I remember the first time that it really hit me what I was praying on. And you can always listen. I have episodes that I pray all the mysteries of the Rosary and also the Divine Mercy Chaplet. If you just search for that back on way previous episodes of the Catholic Mama. But I also love this book. It's, I think, Father Rooney compiled it, and it's how to pray, not just say the Rosary. And it goes through, and for every Hail Mary, it has, a sentence or two that you can kind of focus your mind on. So it really puts you in that time and place of when that mystery was happening. And so especially in the sorrowful mysteries, to put me in the position to see Jesus in the, be present when he was suffering. Wow. That really changed the way I spoke to other people and how I felt about other people and their struggles. And also small things. The Memorare is one that I just really love. Just to be able to have a mother in heaven who is the untire of knots, looking for ways that she can help out to me, or being able to pray to my guardian who is the untire of knots, looking for ways that she can help out to me, or being able to pray to my guardian angel, or the guardian angels of my children or husband, praying that they are growing to keep them safe, help them grow in Christ, pray that their future spouses, my children's future spouses, are growing in Christ now, currently. it makes everything interconnected. And it would be something like, when I was dabbling in Eastern religions, trying to imagine that we're all connected, we're all woven out of the same cloth, everything from the tree to the chair to the President of the United States to the Dalai Lama to me and the beggar. And, so you try to imagine, I would try to picture, if you ever read the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, at the end, he's looking in the river and he's seeing all the people, past, present, and future in the river. I would try to do that as, this poorly educated Eastern religious spiritual type person. And I couldn't get formed a connection between myself, other humans, the other creatures that God has made us stewards of, in a way that is more real to me than anything I ever previously tried to do by studying Eastern religions or meditation or anything like that. So prayer life in general, from the big to the small, has been huge. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, the feast days. The Catholic faith is so rich in celebrating the saints and giving them their feast days. If you're listening today, I'm recording this on the feast day of the Nativity of Mary. If you didn't know, there's only 3 birthdays that the Catholic Church celebrates in its calendar, and that's Jesus, right, on Christmas, the Nativity of John the Baptist, and then of Mary. So it was fun. I mean, it helps bring us all to life, even with my children and myself. So this morning we decorated with lots of blue sprinkles and blue frosting because Mary's hair color is blue. We lit some candles, sang happy birthday to her, and it was just sweet and nice, but it made it real. And later today, we're going to do a family rosary. That's another thing. Mark that off the to-do list. That will be done, right? Because it's your mom's birthday. You call your mom on her birthday, you pray the rosary. So, but anything from celebrating St. Augustine or St. Thomas or St. Nicholas or St. Lucia, any of those. I mean, almost every day, I shouldn't say every single day of the Catholic calendar, the liturgical calendar is filled with saints, whether they are well known or little known. And it becomes such a rich, it brings the whole Catholic faith to life in a way that is very personal. If I think back, talk to them from God for thousands of years, and they're still waiting. Or if you have a Protestant tradition, and Jesus is the last one that we really need to talk to, and unless you have some personal connection with Jesus, you're kind of stuck on your own. You got nothing. You may be interested in the early church fathers, but you're also missing out on 2,000 years of more ancient and modern saints. I mean, there's even in the 20th century alone, there have been some really, really amazing saints, from St. Maximilian Kolbe to St. Teresa of Calcutta, Edith Stein. There's just so many great saints living pretty recently, and also ones that were alive, right around the time that Jesus was alive as well. And there's just years in between there of a deep spiritual connection to God that makes everything so much more alive and rich and beautiful. And you get to celebrate those, and you get to learn about them. And no matter everything so much more alive and rich and beautiful, and you get to celebrate those, and you get to learn about them. And no matter if I read, a book a week between now and, when I turn 100, I will never get through all of the beautiful works of literature, of apologetics, of art, of prayer that all of the saints have contributed to our Catholic faith to make it feel and make it actually very real and present now in this time. So I love it. And the saints and feast days are probably that's number 4. All right, the last one. I'm having a hard time just coming up with 5 things. But also just the people. So we'll end with people, and that includes all the wonderful priests and religious that I have been blessed to know over the past 2 years almost. My 3 kids, we got them baptized all at the same time, and mistakenly were tapped as having triplets, because why else would we be getting 3 kids baptized at once? Like, nope, we're converts, so they're all getting washed through at the same time. So I had that done a couple months after I got baptized last year over the summer. and the godmother of my children is a nun from our old parish, Sister Eileen, who has been, she was my RCIA teacher, and has been just a wonderful influence on our family. And she clearly loves children, and she loves bringing children to Christ. She loves bringing adults to Christ, right? She certainly helped me in many, many ways. And my husband's great aunts, a couple of them are nuns, and they're wonderful, just wonderful, loving people. So that has been a huge bonus to becoming Catholic, along with the very many wonderful priests that we've been blessed to know in our old parish and our new one. When we've traveled, that's a great thing about being Catholic. You can go anywhere around the United States, around the world, go to a mass, and know exactly what to expect because you are part of that universal church. So that's been great too, because we've met so many wonderful priests from, the parishes that we go to every, week to week, to ones that we have visited. Like when I got my scapular enrolled, we were at a very traditional church in Michigan, just passing through, and it just happened to be that they were doing this scapular enrollment that day, and I had mine with me in my wallet, so I got to go up there and get my scapular enrolled. And a great priest that day. I mean, the amount of time that he was willing to take in sharing the faith and discussing why the scapular was amazing. It was great. To the very pastoral priest that we've had, it's just been wonderful. And then we also have the parishioners that we've been in contact with, the friends that we've made. My husband and I would lament that we just had a hard time making connections with people as adults, outside of the workspace. And we didn't always have a lot in common with these people besides, liking to drink beer and wine occasionally. Maybe we liked the same kind of music or something. It was hard to find people of similar values. But we didn't really have values at the time anyway that we could clearly define. But now that we do, we've made so many good and strengthened so many good relationships and friendships with people in the church. So I think that covers all 5 things that I love best about being Catholic. There's some truth and goodness and beauty in all of those. But I'd be curious what your 5 things might be. Even if you don't even have 5 yet, and you're still trying to parse out what you might, at thecatholicmama.com/contact. There's a form there to fill out and say hello. Or you can find me on Instagram at thecatholicmama and send me a note. I'd love to hear what drives you to still being Catholic and firm in your faith and what you love about it. Other than that, if you wouldn't mind, and if you like these episodes, please leave a very nice, glowing, beautiful review anywhere you're listening, whether that's iTunes, Amazon, Stitcher, or Google Play, or wherever. And you'll have my eternal gratitude, because it helps spread this little ministry throughout the internet. All right, I think that's it. Until next time, thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.